So, Pan-African Trade Finance Institution, Afrexim Bank, what is called the Africa Export-Import Bank, says it's putting $1 billion aside to help Africa invest in human capital development. That's a big story. One of the big stories on the sidelines of the just concluded World Bank and IMF annual meetings in Bali, Indonesia. The announcement of the $1 billion from Afrexim Bank came just as the World Bank released a new report showing Nigeria at a very poor 152 ranking among 157 countries surveyed around the world. That report got everyone reeling about how Nigeria comes so low in terms of investments in education, in healthcare, in nutrition and diet for children and women, including what you call youth employment. So now there's $1 billion coming on the table. How should this money be invested? We have this presentation from Professor Jeffery Sachs, who is a development economist and he spoke at the Afrexim event in Bali. Let's take a listen.
My view is that the information revolution is the basis for Africa to be able to make revolutionary advances in healthcare, in government services, in education and educational quality, and of course in the functioning of the private sector economy as well. What do you need for that? You need physical infrastructure and you need people trained, of course, in the new technologies. So this is crucial to build out the fiber, to build out the digital capacities, to ensure that the universities across the continent are teaching these technologies and creating a new generation of engineers that can harness these technologies across all of the major sectors of Africa. There's a third revolution that's going on also that's going to work for Africa's benefit, and that is the energy transformation that is vital for us to get climate change under control. Now, of course, President Obasanjo's country remains an oil powerhouse. Oil hasn't always been used to the best effect because we know there are resource curses as well as resource benefits. But we are going to have to move out of fossil fuels because of the growing climate disaster. And this is also going to work to Africa's advantage, actually, because the major transformation underway in energy is to solar power, in which you are the world champions in potential. We know, and all of us have seen it on a map, how a small part of the Sahara could power the entire world. Build out this capacity. China, incidentally, has a vision of interconnecting the world's renewable energy supplies. This is a marvelous initiative. They call it Global Energy Interconnection. It's a natural partnership of China and Africa to develop the solar power, the hydropower, some regions with wind power. You have geothermal energy down the Rift Valley of East Africa. Africa can be an energy powerhouse of renewable energy. And the Sahara solar is the best in the world, but you need a power grid to develop it and to carry it to Europe, to the Middle East, and electrons move so fast that the Sahara can be exported to China, and that's their idea too. This can be a global industry for Africa. It needs the building. You also still have a lot of untapped hydropower, as you know. 50 gigawatts of Inga Falls, which has been on the drawing board for the last 60 years. It's time to get that project financed. because that would be a project that would provide power through Central Africa, clean, zero carbon, base load hydroelectric power for 200 million people of Central Africa. It's a great project. It requires, again, this bank, Africa's growing financial strength, partnership with China to get that done. And that is a wonderful project as well. So frankly, I see this disequilibrium as working for Africa's benefit. It's time for the breakthrough to be fully achieved on the continent. There are, to my mind, two critical steps that I would like to see put in place to make this possible, in addition to the investments in infrastructure that I mentioned. One is for the African Union to fully realize its potential as the great unifier of the continent. Because we're moving to an era where regional strength is essential. Africa should be a unified region, politically, geopolitically, economically, technologically. And this is the opportunity for that. Of course, Africa is 54 countries right now because it was divided up in 1885 that way, not because that's the natural way for Africa to be in the 21st century. And the African Union is the right vision and the right instrument for unity so that Africa can have its place in the world leadership with a strong geopolitical voice, representing 1.4 billion people, and you'll soon be 2 billion people, and you'll be the largest region in the world, and a region that is technologically advancing rapidly. And if you have the economic unity, the open borders within Africa, projects that are transnational, like Inga Falls, like the Sahara solar energy, like the power that can come throughout the geothermal in the East Africa and so forth. Africa will be, of course, a global leader as a strong, largest region in the world. So this is one part that I think is very timely. The reforms of the African Union that are now being put in place to strengthen it, the open aviation that has been introduced, the open borders of trade, the trans-border physical infrastructure is a marvelous opportunity. But there's one more thing that I would like to see and like to recommend, and it's very much along President Obasanjo's vision and the way he called it 18 years ago to bring the health crisis under control so successfully. And that is a similar call to action. We were just discussing it a moment ago. This is the time, ladies and gentlemen, to ensure that every child in Africa, every boy and every girl, gets a full, high-quality education in this generation, without exception. The Sustainable Development Goals call for that. SDG 4 says universal completion, at least through upper secondary school for every child by the year 2030. Let me give you one not good fact. Right now, 3/4 of African children are not completing secondary school. This is the glaring shortfall that needs to be ended. Take the commitment that every child entering school today at age 5 is going to be supported to complete school at least through age 18, at least through upper secondary education. That every girl and every boy in school today is going to be empowered and financed to stay in school, at least through completing secondary education, and many of them will go on for higher education, for vocational or tertiary education. Reach 100% completion by 2030, if not earlier. Make that commitment. I can tell you, my wife and I, Sonia and I, were in Accra just a few days ago. President Nana Akufo-Addo, as you may know, announced recently that Ghana would ensure free upper secondary education for every child. This should be the policy across the entire continent. And every leader, and you're all leaders, should implement this, because we can't afford any child that doesn't have the skills needed for the 21st century. And believe me, if you have a continent which will be the youngest continent of workers in the world, the most energetic young people, and African leaders tell the world, we guarantee these kids are going to get a quality education, we're going to see to it, we're going to hold ourselves accountable to it, we're going to look for partners to ensure that, the business is going to flow in also. Because what international business wants to know, will we have skilled workers that are going to be working in our enterprises? And if Africa makes clear, not only are you going to have skilled workers, you're going to have the largest workforce of young people in the world, and they are going to be properly trained and properly educated across the continent. This is the last piece of the puzzle, in my view, for the definitive breakthrough of Africa's development to become middle income and soon enough high income region of the world. One of the things that I believe can be done is to take the leaf out of the president's vision and say, okay, we had a global fund to fight disease 18 years ago. Now we need an Africa fund to ensure quality education for every child. I serve as special advisor to the Secretary General of the UN on the Sustainable Development Goals. I want to tell you, if Africa will make that pledge, I want to assure you, I, and I know many others, will work tirelessly to help you fulfill that pledge. You make the fund, I'll help you fill it. We'll go out, there are a lot of rich people around, by the way. I'll go door to door for you. I've already started the phone calls. But I can't do more till you have the fund for African education. And till you have the pledge across the continent that every boy and every girl is going to have a quality education, and the young people on this continent are going to be well-trained and well-equipped to be leaders of the 21st century. So that's a disequilibrium, but it's a positive disequilibrium. Africa has wonderful opportunities right now. The things that worry the United States are the things that should excite Africa, frankly. That there is more growth, more balance, more technology, more diffusion of power, knowledge, capacity all over the world. This is the good news, and this is Africa's opportunity. Thank you very much.
Professor Jeffery Sachs, a development economist on Africa's human capital investment. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.